Here,
The one
missing
that
out.
was there was one and deception, something social media, yeah. Are these all the ones that you've done up to now? Social media, movies, music, yoga, FOMO?
Here,
Yeah, no, I know, but here's the FOMO.
smart message.
Ah, cool. Are you doing it again?
Hi.
Still, like, who knows? You want me to do it again? I can. So, this week we're going to talk about a bit of a, يعني, it was a bit, when I was told what to do, like the topic for this kind of deception, it was a bit awkward, I didn't know what to do. It's, funny enough, the more I read about it, or the more I reflected back on things I've read before, this is actually a big issue. And here, this is really the misuse of spiritual weapons. And basically what I'm going to do today is I'm going to basically let the church fathers tell you about this, and I'm not going to say much about it. So I'm going to be reading to you some stuff from St. Athanasius on the life of St. Anthony. I'm going to be reading from a book called Wounded by Love by a guy called St. Porphyrios, who's a Greek monk. I'm going to read from a book called The Unseen Warfare from Theophan the Recluse, who is also a Russian monk. And basically they all talk about the same thing. The thing is, when you start having a relationship with Christ, you know the term, the struggle is real? The struggle is real. It gets really intense. Nothing easy comes out of it, and the reason is there's someone out there that does not want you to get closer to Christ. And the devil is real. The devil is not a made-up myth or fiction or something that you consider Greek mythology. The devil is real. Christ spoke about the devil very clearly. He cast out demons. The apostles talked about the devil. St. Paul talked about the devil. Actually, I want to read to you. Can someone actually marry you? You're good at this stuff. Can you read Ephesians 6:10-13? This gives you a sense of what we're up against. And this is real, guys. This is not me telling you stuff that is fairy tales. This is real. So, what we struggle with is what Mary is about to read right now.
What's the verse?
Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10-13.
Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of the wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand.
Thank you. So your war, you know when you say, what is the difference between a battle and a war?
Smaller fight, smaller groups or wars like in a country and a country.
Well, basically a war is made up of small battles. Exactly. So you're right. So we are in a constant state of war. Does anyone feel like this on a daily basis, that you are actually in a constant state of war? In Christianity, there is no such thing as being, and we say this a lot, there's no such thing as being passive or being neutral. There is no neutral in Christianity. You are either on one side fighting the war, or you're on the devil's side. You're either on God's side or the devil's side. There is no in between. There is no neutral. If you're complacent, if you're not doing good actions when you have the opportunity to do so, even if you're not murdering or lying or doing any of the severe sins that we consider, you're still not on the right side. The lack of doing good is considered a sin. If you don't believe me, read the Epistle of St. James and he will tell you so. So, our fight is against something that is very powerful, and because it's a war, that means we are going to lose some battles and we're going to win some battles. Some battles we're going to fall in sin. That's okay. That doesn't mean we lost the war. We lost the battle. We get up and we fight again. And it's hard and it takes up a lot of energy. But it's not up to us. Because if you depend on yourself, and I'm going to read you actually one of the things from the Unseen Warfare, how one of the tricks of the devil is to make you think that you are able to do this by yourself. If you decide to do it by yourself, you're going to fail miserably. To fight the war by yourself. And to fight the war thinking that you're doing something good. As in making yourself pray more, or even fast more, or do stuff that is considered more ascetic without the guidance of your father of confession, could be from the devil. Now, let me read to you some of the stuff here about how the devil can actually use good things that we consider good in a spiritual life against you, if you're not careful. Okay? One of the biggest deceptions of the devil is to give you what's called a false zeal, which almost becomes like fanaticism. You become a fanatic. So let me read to you from Unseen Warfare. Unseen Warfare is a great book. I think this is probably me just advertising a few good books because I'm not going to speak. I'll let them speak. Unseen Warfare was written by a monk in the 16th century, but Saint Theophan the Recluse, who is a Russian monk, he edited the book and translated it and added some things to it. So let me read to you what he says about false zeal or fanaticism. So I have a bunch of bookmarks here.
Prime real estate.
Okay, ready guys? I want you to listen very carefully because these people have... The reason I'm reading these people is because they try to live a spiritual life and they know what the devil does. Let me just backtrack a second. I'll come back to the point I mentioned earlier and then I'll follow. When you decide to have a personal relationship with Christ, you enter into a war. Okay? You enter into a war on the side of God against the devil. The devil will start attacking you by trying to make you fall in sin. If you, through the grace of God, persevere, he has other tricks up his sleeve. The devil is not one to give up easily. If you show that you are advancing spiritually and he's not able to make you fall in certain sins, he will have certain traps for you across the way, across your spiritual life. Even if you reach a stage where you become so ascetic and so close to Christ, he has some things he can deceive you with it too. So I'm going to read some of those things to you right now. When the deceitful devil sees that we are advancing rightly on the path of virtue, with lively eagerness and in good order, in spite of his attempts to lead us astray, by his obvious enticements to evil, then he transforms himself into an angel of light. And now by seemingly good thoughts, now by texts from Holy Scriptures, now by examples of the saints, he urges us to undertake excessive and untimely efforts for spiritual perfection, in order to cast us down into the abyss at the moment when we imagine we stand on the summit. So the devil actually and I think this is more on people who are advanced in their spiritual life, if you're very advanced in your spiritual life, the devil can actually appear like an angel of light and start reading stuff to you from the Scripture to make you seem like you're doing the right thing. And I'm going to read something again from St. Anthony about this, but let me just keep going here. Thus, he teaches some cruelly to mortify their flesh by fast, flagellation, sleeping on bare earth, and other similar bodily hardships, in order to make them fall into pride. Here's the deception of the devil. If you decide to take the spiritual life by yourself, which is what the devil will try to make you believe, you are falling into the first and ultimate disaster of Christianity, which is pride. Once you fall into pride, you are an easy prey. It's an easy catch for the devil. So and keep in mind, he's using things that are not bad. He's telling you, oh no, get up and pray. Get up and do this. But if he does it to you and you feel you're doing it out of your own power, then you fall into pride. And pride can be disastrous. It makes you so easy as a target. Let me read to you, I'll just skip a passage, and he says again here, moreover, I advise you to use good judgment in undertaking feats of physical asceticism, when there is a need for them. Do not launch out with lofty standards, but begin at the bottom. For it is better to climb upwards gradually than suddenly to undertake something lofty and be forced to climb down to your shame. So what is he saying here? He's saying when you're growing in your spiritual life, one of the ways to overcome the deception of the devil is to do it gradually. And one thing is to always have a guidance of a spiritual father. Every single one in this room should have a spiritual guide. If you think you can do it on your own, you're already falling into the first deception of the devil. Everyone should have a spiritual guide, and that spiritual guide should act as a mirror to show you how you should proceed. Don't do things that are crazy, ascetic, and think you're doing the super Christian thing, because this could be a deception from the devil. Take it gradually. Everything is gradual. St. Anthony used to say the royal way, as in the best way, is the midway. Like, don't go on either extremes.
Really? He said that?
Yes.
He loved the whole world?
Yes.
And he said go
Yes.
in the middle?
Yes. And he actually said,
What
I'll
a
tell you
hypocrite.
something funny about St. Anthony. St. Anthony spent 20 years in seclusion. He spent 20 years of his life living as an ascetic by himself in some abandoned, I don't know if it was a castle or something, like some abandoned place. He just lived in it. 20 years. And people said when he came out, like people saw him before he went to seclusion, and he came out and they saw him, they said Anthony looked like the same. Like he wasn't slimmer or fatter. He looked the same. Like Anthony was all about being in the middle and not doing anything in extremes, even though he left the world. Okay. At the same time, I advise you also to avoid the other extremes. So the first extreme is don't aim too high in the spiritual life when you're first starting. And he says, at the same time, I advise you also to avoid the other extreme, into which even such men fall as are considered spiritual. Ruled by self-pity and self-indulgence, they exhibit too great a concern for the preservation of their physical health and take such great care of themselves that they tremble at the slightest effort, afraid to impair their health. The other extreme is لا يعني هقوم اصلي انا هتعب لا انا عندي شغل بكره الصبح لازم اخش انام عشان اعرف اصحى بكره فريش اوكي عشان صحتي بس عشان اعرف This is the other extreme. But don't take either extreme. Don't take the extreme where you're forcing yourself into something big, and don't take the extreme where your health becomes such a big issue that prevents you from doing anything spiritual. Nothing is more in their thoughts, nothing a more favorite subject of their thought than preserving their life. Yet by inventing delicate dishes, and then he goes on, so this is one example from Saint Theophan the Recluse, talking about how the devil can attack. Don't start too high, always have someone who's a spiritual guide. Everything is about gradual, like start gradually in your spiritual life. Funny enough, the devil is also very smart. He can use certain virtues to make you go astray from other virtues. Okay? It sounds weird. Let me read you an example of what that means. Bardo, the same book, he talks about this. This is actually very interesting. When I read it, I thought it was very interesting. For example, okay, if a sick man is disposed to bear his illness with a good heart and does so basically God is trying to teach someone patience by giving him an illness. The enemy, knowing that he will thus become well-grounded in the virtue of patience, attempts to disrupt this good disposition. For this purpose, he begins to remind him of the many good deeds he could have performed had his position been different, and tries to convince him that had he been in a good health, he would have achieved much in the service of God, bringing much profit to himself and others. He would have been able to go to church, to talk to people, to read, to write for the instruction of his brethren, and so on. If he notices that such thoughts are acceptable, the enemy introduces them into the man's mind more and more often, multiplies and embellishes them, makes them enter the feelings and incites desires and impulses to such actions by depicting how successful these or other works would have been, and by evoking regret that the man is tied hand and foot by his illness. So God can try to God gives people illnesses so that you can learn patience. Patience is actually one of, I'm speaking personally here, I have no patience. It's one of the hardest virtues to acquire. I have very little patience. And so if God is trying to make this man acquire patience, what does the devil do? He's not going to tell him, لا يا عم, it's unfair. He could do. Some people he tells them, it's unfair. Why you? Why should you get this illness? It's unfair. Everyone else is walking free. But the devil is actually smarter. He will go tell him, you could have been able to serve, وكان زمانك بتخدم دلوقتي, وكان زمانك بس عشان انت عيان بقى خلاص تعمل ايه بقى? You see how the devil is actually like using what is considered a virtue to make another virtue seem like it's actually something that is bad for the person.
Burden.
Huh?
A burden.
A burden, yes. Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, but now there's a problem because the natural wiring of the human mind has negative thoughts. The devil tells you lies. They are kind of similar. How do you differentiate between both? Because we are wired to criticize ourselves. That's normal. That has nothing to do with that. The devil makes it even worse. But how do you tell the difference?
I don't know about us being wired to think
We
negative.
are wired to think negative. The human mind is wired to think negative. And it's easier for the mind to go from the negative side than the positive side.
I think
That's
yes, in
wild.
the sense, yes, in the sense that if you want to get a bit scientific, like your limbic system or your like reptile brain or whatever they call it, which is the fight or flight. It's a matter of survival. That's why you tend to think about the negative. Like, if I don't run now, this thing is going to eat me, so I better run. Like, okay? So, yes, but it's not the same. I don't think that means the same thing here. Like, here it's different. Here
The
it's,
majority of us say, I'm not doing enough, I should have done more, this might be the devil or me. Easy.
so this goes back to the first point. You should have a father of confession that knows you very well, that can guide you in this matter. If he knows you very well, he will know that if this is your self-criticism or if this is something from the devil, a fight from the devil. So you should have a spiritual father to guide you in that. Okay, the devil actually also sometimes would use your zeal for prayer to give you pride. I'm going to read you something very interesting from San Diego about this, but also from Wounded by Love, another book. I'm here just promoting this. This is The Life and Wisdom of Saint Porphyrios, a great guy. The first half of the book is basically his biography or autobiography. And then the second half is he writes on certain topics. It's actually one of the best books I've ever read. It was Sivan is the one that recommended it for me. I'm going to read to you something here from the book where he talks about prayer and how the devil can enter through prayer. If you are going to occupy yourself with prayer of the heart exclusively, you must have the guidance of a spiritual father. It repeats, and the funny thing is, everywhere you read in terms of modern and past church fathers, they all say the same thing. It's funny because they all have the same way of thinking, even though they were like centuries apart. Okay? You must have the guidance of a spiritual father. Prayer of the heart is impossible without a spiritual guide. There is a danger of the soul being deluded. Care is needed. Your spiritual guide will teach you how to get into the right order for prayer, because if you do not get into the right order, there is danger of you seeing the Luciferic light, of living in delusion, and being plunged in darkness, and then one becomes aggressive and changes character and so on. Let me skip to the part that I really want you to do here. And if in this, okay, so he talks about, I'll give you a bit of a context. He talks about how every one of us has the good self and the bad self, okay? Every one of us has internally inside them two things that are conflicting with each other. You have an internal war, okay? You have your good self that is trying to make you go in the right direction, and you have your other self that is pulling you down. So he says, and if in the spiritual dimension, desire is enkindled not by your good self, but by your other self, the egotistical self, then undoubtedly you will begin to see lights. So when you're praying, what's praying is not your good self, but your other self, you will begin to see lights, but not the light of Christ. And undoubtedly, you will begin to experience a pseudo-joy. Pseudo-joy, yani semi-joy. So when you pray, you'll start to experience some joy, but it's not the real joy. But in your outward life, in your relations with other people, you will be ever more aggressive and irascible, more quick-tempered and fretful. Actually, this is a kind of diagnosis to the state of your prayer. A lot of us, when we pray, and we like to do it by ourselves without the guidance of a spiritual guide, and we decide to increase our prayer or to do certain things to make ourselves get more close to Christ based on our own. Can I just finish this? If we decide to do that on our own, the devil will give you the sensation of pseudo joy, of yeah, wow, but not the yeah, wow. You're gonna start looking at other people and being like, I'm so much better than those guys. I'm better. Pride creeps into you, and you feel that this prayer is somehow making you much better than everybody else, and puts you at a position that is higher than everyone else, because you feel you've reached spiritual degrees that no one else has been able to acquire. And because of that, you become more aggressive. You become more aggressive. Like, it's very hard to believe that someone was living a prayerful life and being aggressive. But surprisingly, I'll tell you this from my personal experience, I have experienced it. I've experienced times in the past where I tried to do things on my own, and I would pray, but I would see, not only that would I see no results in my prayer, but I would, because I'm trying to pray, I'm already judging people in my heart because I feel I'm already doing something and others are not doing. So I'm already judging people in my heart. I don't say it out loud, but I judge them in my heart. So, and it made me actually aggressive in the sense that, man, these people are like, people are not good Christians nowadays. And this is what I would think to myself, like, man, these people are so far away from Christ. As if I have reached a level where I'm able to say that, you know? So there is a way where you can pray in the wrong way and the devil can use that against you. Every prayer should happen through a spiritual guide, and you should do it gradually. Okay, another thing about, he talks about the difference. Oh, did you have a question? What? Mark?
Isn't it possible that you're praying like with the spiritual guide, but I mean like you still experience this?
You still experience what?
Like that pseudo joy and that like you pray and then you're still aggressive or whatever.
So I'm not going to answer that, but if anything, I'll ask you, read this on prayer. He has a whole chapter on prayer. He talks about that, the whole thing. Even if you are, he talks about humility. If you're praying with humility, then ultimately God will give you that kind of everlasting joy. Like, humility is the thing that you have to keep pushing for. And that's why we all feel the pseudo joy, because we all have not attained that full humility yet. But yeah, the chapter is really good. Okay, one more thing about the difference between being a zealot and being a fanatic. Okay? What is the difference, by the way? Can someone tell me before I go through this? What's the difference between a zealot and a fanatic? Any ideas?
So the difference between zeal and fanaticism.
Voila.
شفت بقى شفت بسطتها ازاي كده.
What did you say?
Like a fanatic usually will impose, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a zealous one who just, you look at him and you think, oh, he's fiery, or he's zealous, or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
يعني الزلس هيولع في نفسه، الفناتيك عايز يولع في التانيين.
It's actually
Fantastic.
okay. Let me read to you the difference between zealots and fanatics. We should be zealots. A zealot is a person who loves Christ with all his soul and who serves his fellow men in Christ's name. Love for God and for our neighbor. They go together and cannot be divorced. Passion, yearning, and tears along with contrition, not for a purpose, but all as an overflowing of the heart. Fanaticism has nothing to do with Christ. Be a true Christian, then you won't lead to conclusions about anybody, but your love will cover all things, even to a person of another religion. You will always act as a Christian. That is to say, you will show respect for him in a gracious manner, irrespective of his religion. You will care for a Muslim when he is in need. Speak to him and keep company with him. There must be a respect for freedom of the other person, Just as Christ stands at the door and knocks and does not force an entry, but waits for the soul to accept him freely on its own, so we should stand in the same way in relation to every soul.
What
This-
specifically a Muslim? Sorry.
Because he is Greek, right? So the Greeks had this thing with the Turkish, like because Turkey invaded Greece and Marafshe. But the Greeks actually, they really dislike Turks, and because Turks are Muslims, therefore they dislike Muslims. I'll tell you a funny story about that. My dad went to Greece a long time ago, and he ordered Turkish coffee, and they almost killed my dad. Like, no, it's called Greek coffee. Don't do Turkish coffee. Well, there's like a deep hate. That is weird.
Also,
Anyway.
that explains why I was talking to a Greek person, and the first thing he asked me when he knew I was a Egyptian, I'm a Muslim. But I thought it was a benign question, so that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, so there's something there.
Yeah, exactly.
انت مصري بجد؟ مسلم
Okay.
مسيحي.
I'm going to read to you something from St. Anthony here about the same, on the same lines as fanaticism and zeal. The life, this is Life of Anthony by St. Athanasius. It's a very small book. I just printed it out. It's free online. Read it, because this is the only, like in terms of like a biography of St. Anthony, this is the only one we have from St. Athanasius. And it's actually said that St. Athanasius used to hang out with St. Anthony all the time, like they were buddies. And St. Athanasius wrote the very famous book on the Incarnation. And he said that it goes that St. Anthony actually kind of reviewed the book or edited the book for him. But I mean, they were good buddies. They knew each other. They were very close. So here he's talking about the devil and how the devil can deceive you. Okay? And by the way, like, if you really want to see the devil in action, like serious action, like this is the action movies kind of style, like
تعال
this is
صار
like
عندي.
حاجات بتطير وضرب نار وبتاع, really, like this is really good. Don't they? And they are ever ready to change shape. He's talking about the devils, okay? St. Anthony. Frequently they pretend to chant the Psalms. These are the devils, huh? And they give readings from the scriptures. And again, when we ourselves are reading, they recite what we are reading. Often when we are sleeping, they awaken us to pray. The devil awakens St. Anthony to pray. And they do this over and over, hardly allowing us to sleep at all. Oftentimes they take the form of monks, and playing the part of the devout, speak in order to deceive us through this sort of shape, and afterwards they drag us wherever they want. But we do not need to pay attention to them, even if they do awaken us to pray. For they do not do this out of fear of God, as though they cared about us, but so that they can bring the simple to unbelief and cause them to be ignorant of their way of life, and believe in their hearts that their asceticism is worthless for them. Anyways, then he goes on. So, the demons were so real, if you want to read something, if you really want to understand how the demons work, read the Desert Fathers. The Desert Fathers, so many stories. St. Macarius, St. Anthony, all these people actually dealt with the devil like face to face. Like St. Anthony, the devil used to appear to him and beat him up. Actually, there's one, that there's a story here. There's some really funny stories. There's a story where the devil appeared to St. Anthony and he said, I am God, or I am Providence, or something like that. And St. Anthony got really aggravated because he thought it was like too obnoxious of the devil to say that, and he started beating the devil up. And then, anyways, it's funny. It's really, yeah, anyways. Okay. So we said, let me just backtrack a second. So your spiritual life, you have to have a spiritual guide. If anything, I want you to leave here, I want you to leave with a few things. The devil can deceive you very easily. You have to have a spiritual guide. Khalas? Everything has to be gradual. Nothing has to be jumping hoops. You start gradual. The middle road is the royal road, based on St. Anthony. So always ask your father of confession how you should progress in your spiritual life and your prayer, so that you do it the right way. One thing that I don't want to spend a lot of time on, but this is actually true, is that the devil, not all of us experience this, but the devil can actually give visions to people. I've seen this in Egypt more than I've seen it here. Like I've seen people in Egypt tell me, ده أنا حلمت الحلم اتحقق. ده أنا حلمت بكذا كذا كذا وصحيت تاني يوم حصل كذا كذا كذا. Have you ever experienced anything like this?
مخدرات يا معلم. كله في سندوتشات الفول.
No, but seriously, like this is, I hear it so much in Egypt. Like it's a common thing between, I don't know why the tons like to talk about it specifically, but they sometimes to dreamt that this guy was going to pass and he passed.
It's seen as a gift.
It's seen as a gift. بس خلي بالك بقى لأن St. Anthony says this can easily be from the devil. And the devil does it intentionally so that he can make you feel special. And there's a very clear difference between visions given from God and visions given from the devil. The devil doesn't know the future. He doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But he can make predictions based on certain, like his own experience. يعني مثلا إيه? St. Anthony talks about an example here. Let me read it for you. It's probably a better way. St. Anthony says, if they appear to prophesy, let no one pay attention or listen to them. For it frequently happens that they speak about brothers who are coming to us, and after a few days, these brothers do arrive. يعني الدevil يروح يقول St. Anthony, by the way, the fee of Fulani, he's going to come and see you. Why does the devil say this? Because the devil already saw the person starting to walk. Because back then it took days to walk. So he saw the person walking to St. Anthony, so he goes to St. Anthony and tells him, oh, this guy's coming to see you. So St. Anthony's like, oh, I prophesied. No, he didn't prophesy. The devil didn't know the future. He just saw the guy walk. Okay? Now the demons do this not because they care about those who listen to them, but so the latter might be persuaded to trust them. Afterwards, they come under their power and the demons destroy them. But if they speak, we need to rebuke them because we have no need of them. What St. Anthony is saying here, we don't need those visions. We don't need to know what's going to happen or so-and-so happened and oh my God, I was right, I had a dream about it. No, nobody cares. God gives that gift to very specific people and it's very clear that it's from God. In other cases, it can bring the person into pride, which makes him an easy prey for the devil, or he or she.
How is it very clear that it's from God?
It's very clear from God because the result of the vision is for the edification of the person or for the edification or salvation of someone else. Not useless information. Not so-and-so will pass the exam. Nobody cares. Not so-and-so will have this. Nobody cares. But if it's something related to someone's salvation, even if you look through the Old Testament and the New Testament, every prophecy that was made to bring the people of Israel back to God. There was a reason for the prophecy. When the prophecy said, oh, your homes will be destroyed and the temple will be destroyed, is not to tell them like, oh, look at me, I'm good. No, but stay like, repent. Do something about it. But every one of those visions had a specific purpose that is for the salvation of the person or someone else. If it's outside of those two things, then it's easily from the devil. I'll read one more thing about fake humility. The devil can also give you fake humility. This is actually the best one.